Today, we're going to discuss the issue of how did Israel come to be? And is a Zionist or a pro-Zionist, anti-Zionist view what's right in our current situation? We're going to go over that. We're going to go over the sale of public lands. Is this something that we should be looking at positively or negatively with the Mike Lee Big Beautiful Bill? So we're going to go over that. Of course, some Nikki Knows Facts. We're going to do some interesting trivia today. And of course, we're going to be doing the final part of chapter 13 of The Great Divorce. With that said, yours truly sitting in the producer's chair. Be in prayer for Miss Jody. Mr. Producer is out and he is taking care of his mother. She's in the hospital. I think everything's going to be all right. But I'm joined by the panel, and we got, first off, Miss Nikki. How's it going?
It's good. How are you today?
Doing all right. So to our left, we got Charlie. How's it going, sir?
Greetings. Good to see everyone today.
Glad to have you there in the chair of philosophy, where I'm usually sitting. And then we got Steve in the chair of culture.
Yes, sir.
How's it going?
And being politically incorrect, man, on a daily basis. Keeping everybody on their toes.
As always, in the chair of culture. So glad to have you there. And so I'll be sitting here in the producer's chair, and we're going to be kind of going through a little bit of the formation of Israel. How did we get to this point? Where are we? And how did the nation of Israel form? Can a Christian be Zionist in the year of our Lord 2025? We're going to answer that question. We're also going to look at the biblical prescriptions that are and are not issued in the Bible today. So hang out for those. And of course, we're going to be talking about the removal of the land bill from the big, beautiful bill, and also a little bit about suppressors and short barrel rifles being removed and what's wrong with the American system. So let's kind of slide into it. To start off, just going back to the meme here, we've been dealing with war in the Middle East. Some people say we shouldn't be there. Somehow, our tax dollars have actually funded both sides of the conflict, right? So somehow,
ironic.
This meme, I will never get over this meme. How is it that we have a nation that is American funded fighting another nation that is a proxy for a nation that we've given billions of dollars to? How did we get to this point? This is the beginning of the movie where the guy goes, it's kind of a strange story. You might be wondering how I got here. Well, it all started in the 19-teens with the Balfour Declaration. So let's go ahead and get into the history of why we are here and what that looks like. I'm going to rely a little bit on the Imperial War Museum's video. This is a British museum that does a really good job laying out some of the facts, and we're going to go ahead and bit by bit kind of take some of their documentary on this issue, and then we're going to carry it the rest of the way. So I'd like to start off with a good analysis of what happened, how did Israel come to be, what was Palestine before World War II. So to that end, let's go ahead and pull up our first clip. Now, I'm going to be producing here, so you guys are going to get to have me running right alongside here. Yeah, Steve is not happy about that. Oh. We miss you, Mr. Producer. So we're going to go ahead and roll it.
Then is an imperial lifeline. It's the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal is the quickest route from the empire, especially India, the jewel in the crown of the British Empire, to Britain. You don't have to go all the way around the Horn of Africa.
Britain had controlled Egypt since 1882 and believed that the Sinai Desert was enough of a buffer to defend the canal. But when the First World War began in 1914, the Ottoman Empire took Germany's side. In February 1915, the Ottomans launched a surprise attack across the desert to attack the Suez Canal.
It's easily beaten off by the British and Indian defenders, but the British are really worried that the Ottomans are going to use Sinai as a launch pad for further attacks on the canal. There's then a total mind change in British strategy back in London. There's stalemate on the Western Front. The Russians are collapsing into revolution.
So let's go ahead and break down what we just heard. This is in the 19 teens. What is the primary concern of the Brits?
Suez Canal. I've got to have a place. I've got to have a means to ship without breaking the bank.
And I want to have a secure zone. That is the primary reason of why we're anywhere near a Jewish state starting. It started off with the Brits wanting to put a buffer zone. And they didn't start with a Jewish state.
Right.
They started with a few other things. And this is what led to the huge amount of turmoil and strife that we see today. Part of it. I think it would have been there one way or the other, but I believe that it is significantly exacerbated by Britain's handling of this. Britain made a huge, huge mess.
They probably one of the worst messes they've made in worldwide governance. And I use that term very loosely, but it was very bad for them.
Correct. Now, it's not uncommon for a world superpower like Britain to get colonialism wrong. The Brits were the colonialist power at this time.
Yes.
So now we're looking at this section of space. What was the need? What was the end result and the desire? Well, they wanted to provide a proper buffer zone. So let's go ahead and play this just a little bit further. And I'm going to get, stop me, y'all, if you want me to stop. And we'll kind of run through it here. But this is a great doc, link in the description, on Further Every Day.
And the idea now is to look for a quick victory somewhere else away from France and Flanders. And Lloyd George thinks Palestine is where we can do it. We can knock the Ottomans out of the war, but also the Suez Canal will be safe from any threat.
The area Britain had set its sights on was a larger one than today's Israel-Palestine, made up of different regions east and west of the River Jordan. There were small Christian and Jewish populations, but the majority were Muslim Arabs. After centuries of Ottoman rule, many Arabs now wanted a nation of their own.
Nationalism is growing across the multinational empires of Europe during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and the Ottoman Empire is no stranger to this. The main reason for this is in 1908, there's a revolution within Turkey to try to strengthen and modernize the empire. It's called the Young Turk Revolution. And what happens is some very nationalistic Turks take over the government and are really into centralizing and pushing the idea of Turkish identity. And this really starts to rile a lot of these Arab leaders. And this is where we start to get pan-Arab nationalism coming out. And the idea...
And by the way, I want to add something real quick.
Mm-hmm.
At this time, you have, I believe it's 7% Israeli, Jewish, distant people living in this land.
Yes.
And what you start to see at this point, or what you've been seeing up until this point, is a second-class citizenship for Jews in an Arab-controlled nation. So that's important to know. Charlie, I know you have thoughts.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to bring up here is that when it comes to Turkey and the rest of the Middle East, Turkey is its own... has
animal.
its very own identity, and it's not. When you think of the Middle East, you think of countries like Jordan, you think of Syria, you think of Afghanistan, and they're all closely linked. They all kind of work together, if you will. Yeah, they have their own things, and obviously you got the Shiites and mullahs and stuff like that. That's not what I'm talking about. They're pretty unified on things. Get rid of Israel. The issue is when you look at Turkey, they don't really hook up that much with them.
Hold up for a little bit, because we're going to address this later, and you're seeing a new interesting alignment, but I totally agree.
Yep.
I totally agree. And so let's keep playing.
Of one independent land for all of those Arab peoples.
One of those leaders was Sharif Hussein of Mecca. In charge of the Islamic holy cities of Mecca and Medina, he was held in high regard by the local people. The British decided to use this to their advantage, promising him rulership over an independent Arab state if he rebelled against Ottoman rule. Sure enough, in 1916, the revolt began with...
So wait, so we have a promise. You're going to find that this is promise number one that has led us to our current state.
Going to give you control over an Arab state.
And it extends over Saudi Arabia all the way up to the Mediterranean, including Israel, currently called Palestine, San Jack of Jerusalem, etc. A lot of names for it. Yep. Keep going.
Hussein's sons, Faisal and Abdullah, leading the fighting. As British and Commonwealth troops under General Allenby advanced through Palestine, Arab militia, with help from T.E. Lawrence, distracted the Ottomans.
This is a typical Arab headcloth, and it's accompanying a ghul, which is the headband that you keep the headcloth firmly on your head. And these were actually worn by an Arab who took part in that Arab revolt up through the Hijaz and into Palestine and Syria towards the end of the war. This comes from the regular forces of the Sharifian army. These men were former Ottoman soldiers, and they volunteered to fight for Arab independence. And they were particularly important because of their previous military training and skills with modern weapons such as artillery machine.
For just a moment.
Sure.
So one of the things, folks, that I think is really interesting to note here, they're former what? Ottoman soldiers. I am not a fan of outsourcing your military, because who are they going to be committed to?
Yeah.
It brings in, and I only bring this up because it doesn't matter what country. I especially would not want to see America do anything like this. How do I know that you're truly going to fight for American ideals? So, and I know you could extend that statement out, and you could say, well, Charlie, how about Mexican immigrants? How about immigrants from Europe? How about, and we could go on. I get that, and there have been some that have fought valiantly for America. What I'm just saying is, this is interesting to see that kind of thing is not new. It is something that happened at that time, and I find it very ironic. They're former Ottoman soldiers fighting for the Arab state.
Well, and you're actually going to see that this is a coalition that is built specifically to achieve the goal of a Saudi Arabian governorship from this potentate that is promised everything by the Brits. So let's keep going. And again, this is a link in the description below on Further Every Day at Rumble, at YouTube, anywhere podcasts are found. You'll be able to find the full layout from the Imperial War Museum in Britain. This is probably the most level, even, and fair documentary that I've been able to find on the start of Israel. So find the link in the description anywhere you can go on the podcast.
So these men are the Arab forces. They attack lines of communication, they blow up railways, they attack small garrisons, and that makes it very difficult for the Ottomans to move troops and supplies around. And finally, of course, on the 1st of October 1918, Faisal and the Arab army have the honour of taking the surrender of Damascus.
But while the battle for Palestine was still raging, the British were doing secret backroom deals elsewhere. Between November 1915 and January 1916, British and French diplomats Mark Sykes and Francois-Georges Picot carved up the Ottoman Empire into British and French spheres of influence. The borders were largely arbitrary, with little regard for ethnicity or religion of the local populations. France would receive modern-day Syria and Lebanon, as well as parts of Turkey and Iraq, while Britain claimed the rest of modern-day Iraq and southern and eastern Palestine. The remainder of the territory was to be under international control.
What the British are really looking.
So what about Sharif? What about our dear Sharif Hussein?
What's he get?
Uh-oh.
Oh, that's a problem.
So we just created a problem here. And we're going to see that this becomes more and more of an issue. Sharif Hussein donated lots of blood. Okay. And you're seeing that all of this was promised to him. And then, of course, now we set up the mandates. So I want to say this because nothing about the formation of Israel and nothing about the formation of any other nation at the time was clean, was good. A lot of problems with it.
Yep.
What does that mean today? Well, that's a good question. We're gonna answer that in a little bit, but I don't think it. I think it's good to look at where we came from, because this is the common refrain that I always hear is look at the formation of Israel. And so what I want to do for just a moment is I actually want to go ahead and I want to throw a quick note in here on the Balfour Declaration, because this is the next step that they're going to say. So after we set up all these mandates, we said we're going to set up these mandates. They did a third promise. So not only did they promise France, who was a rival colonial empire, that no, it's going to be this international zone that is protected. Well, instead of it being an international zone that was protected, they came and they promised, hey, dear Rothschild, dear Lord Rothschild, okay, this is the Balfour Declaration. What is he going to promise him here? He's going to promise him a new country, okay? He's going to promise him a new country. And I'm going to throw this a little bit up here for our screen in here so we can see it. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have, whoopsies, one second. Dear Lord Rothschild, let's try that one more time. I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy to the Jewish Zionist aspirations, which have been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. His Majesty's government with the favor of the establishment, or is in favor of the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Okay, we also see in this note a promise, an important promise for the protection, and this is what a lot of people go to. They'll say there is a promise for the protection of the rights and privileges of the current people who reside there, including their religious rights. And you'll find that actually right here. Let's see real quick. I'm going to throw this up one more time. Which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights of the political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. So this is written from John Balfour to Lord Rothschild. The Rothschilds were involved. For those of you who were concerned about the conspiracy of the Rothschilds and the Jews owning all this money and they're at the head of all of this, yes, there was actually some involvement from the Rothschild family.
Are they Jewish?
Yeah, they're Jewish.
Okay.
So
that's the history. I mean, that's their legacy. That's their history. That's why they're involved.
Yeah. And no matter what you think of the Rothschilds as secularists, okay, yeah, they have some aspirations on the global stage. That's okay. I mean, I'm not okay with that, but the fact that their Venn diagram intersected with the formation of Israel does not mean that we get to wipe out Israel right now. And so you might be hearing a little bit of where I'm going with this, but bear with me just a little bit further. Those British lords, yeah, they had something going on there. And also, I'll say this, there were Satanists involved also in the formation of Israel, along with Lord Rothschild. There are Satanist Marxists who were involved. And that's a common thing you'll hear. Well, the state of Israel is illegitimate because of the Satanist Marxists. Is Israel a Satanist Marxist state? Not a Marxist state. And you could make an argument that they're a Satanist state. I think they're a Jewish state, just between you and me. I think they're a Jewish state, not a Satanist state. They declare themselves to be a secular Jewish state. And of course, there's a huge Venn diagram overlap here. So again, I'm trying to lay out how do we as Christians navigate Zionism? And we're going to get to the point very, very shortly. But I do believe that it is incredibly important to understand how and why we got here. So to kind of fast forward a little bit, if you like this, the video that we're kind of picking apart, we're critiquing here, Britain's World War I Gamble, the Origins of the Israel-Palestine Conflict, Part 1, link in the description on Further Every Day or Rumble where this is posted. But I would like to direct our attention just a little bit further to a little bit more.
Although Zionism was a popular movement, The majority of Jews were not Zionists and didn't want to move to Palestine.
Jewish immigration to Palestine had been slowly increasing throughout the 1900s, mainly fueled by brutal anti-Semitism and terrible pogroms in Russia. By 1914, the Jews in Palestine numbered around 60,000, or 8% of the population. But for the British, it was Zionists elsewhere that they were concerned with. In an effort to win the support of Jewish communities in both Allied countries like the United States and enemy countries like Austria-Hungary, the UK Foreign Secretary signed the Balfour Declaration, vowing to set up a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine.
So the Balfour Declaration is signed in late 1917, in fact, just after Allenby's victory at the Third Battle of Gaza. And this map shows the situation just before that battle. And it shows the confidence that the British have that they are going to win the war in the Middle East. Because let's face it, on this map, they haven't taken all of this territory yet, but they're already looking at the post-war settlement in this area. There are people within the British cabinet, Prime Minister Lloyd George is one of them, who thinks that having a Jewish homeland in Palestine is the right thing to do. But it's also politically expedient. The British and French war efforts by this time are pretty much under pressure. There's a manpower crisis, there's a crisis in raw materials. The Americans have joined the war in April 1917. And we really need the Americans to ramp up and get stuck into the war effort. So the idea is by supporting this Zionist idea, it will get Jewish financiers and industrialists in America on side, and they will put big pressure on the American government to keep them involved in the First World War and fight for the Allied cause. Now, this idea, this is an anti-Semitic idea that the Jews control world finance and business across capitalist countries. And that idea takes hold and is one of the reasons we think they can put pressure on the American government.
So, okay. Interesting. So the Balfour Declaration was a political maneuver to protect the Suez Canal with a buffer state. Ultimately, we're looking at Israel as that buffer state. Now, why Israel? Why not the Saudis? Good question. Why not this international zone? Good question.
Could it have anything to do with religion?
Well, here's
because, our religion determines our morality.
It does. It does. And I would also say this. I think that there are powers at work here. I also, a little bit of a spoiler, I also do see that those powers are going to end up setting up Israel into a state that is going to bring about Antichrist. But there's a set of oughts and questions that we should ask. Can we support? And really, this is largely in response to people asking last week. We talked about Ted Cruz and his apologetic on Tucker Carlson that was not a very good theological defense. He didn't even remember where he got his verses out of the Bible. And today we're going to look at those verses and we're going to break it down. Should a Christian be a Zionist?
Can I say something about what you're talking about too?
Yes.
Because John Arthur, you're much younger than we are, but I think Steve can attest. Do you remember back in the 70s and the 80s when they talked about the Middle East, one thing they would always say is, they lie. The Middle Eastern people, whenever you did a deal with them or whatever, I mean, that was on the news, and that wasn't a Democrat Republican issue back in the 70s and 80s. That was just a common thing that Middle Eastern people, when you talk to them, they're going to lie. So if they're looking at setting up the Jewish community, it may be, I mean, when have we had major deals with the Middle East?
I mean, it's been very, very fraught. And if you look actually at the last few years, the issue with Israel trying to make deals, we had the three no's. No peace treaty, no peace, no Israel. And that all changed recently with a certain guy by the name of Donald J. Trump in his first term, which we'll get to in a moment. And so, well, let's kind of keep building here, because I think building a good framework for can a Christian or should a Christian be a Zionist? And spoiler, it's a trick question. And we're going to get to the end of that question in just a little bit. But I think it's a good way for us to start thinking. We really should ask, why do we hold the pre-existing ideas that are in our head? What is true? What isn't? And where should we go from there? Right? So why do we say we should protect the children of Israel? That's something that we hear over and over again in the evangelical West. And I think there's a lot of truth to it. I do think that Ted Cruz is apologetic, and I love Ted Cruz. I'm probably still going to vote for him this next time. I can't imagine a better candidate. But his performance on Tucker Carlson, I believe, was poor. And I believe it comes from not thinking through the entirety of the biblical scripture and actually understanding what Genesis 3 was saying and what Paul the Apostle says, which we'll get to in a little bit. But let's keep going just a little bit further, unless you have something, Steve.
Yeah. You talked about Israel bringing in the Antichrist. And, we have to talk about, and part of that is what part of Israel is going to bring that in.
We'll get to it. We'll absolutely get there. So let's keep pushing through, because I believe it is worth looking a little bit further at the formation and how did we get here. So let's go ahead and talk about this real quick. This is the map that was cut up and drawn up. This is what we were supposed to have, the Independent Republic of Turkey on the top. If you're on audio, I'm sorry, I'm going to try to explain. Modern day Syria and part of Iran, and is the French mandate. British mandate is Iran, et cetera, on down the coast. You got Kuwait down there, and then you got the British mandate of Palestine. This was the way they cut it up. Here's a little bit better of an idea. You can see now modern day Syria, Iraq, Iran, all the way to the far west, or east rather, and you've got Lebanon, Palestine, the Transjordan area. This was the layout as it was divvied up by the folks in Great Britain. Now, I want to carry on just a little bit further with our documentary that we were watching from the British Imperial War Museum. And then I want to go ahead and get into the scripture, and I promise we will get to that, because it is going to be the crux of why we look at what we look at here. So,
Jewish immigration to mandatory Palestine continued to grow. By 1931, there were 176,000 Jewish people living there, making up 17% of the population. This led to increased tensions, riots, and violence between the new arrivals and local Arabs who, along with existing Christian populations, were starting to see themselves not only as Arabs, but as distinctly Palestinian people.
What these new Jewish settlers bring in is lots of financial backing, and they start to buy up more and more land. So it's more the fertile agricultural land of Palestine, which actually makes the Jewish population increasingly economically dominant in the area. The British government gets very, very worried about this. In 1930, the colonial secretary puts forward a white paper to drastically limit Jewish immigration into the Palestine Mandate.
And the reason why they're doing this, and I just have to add extemporaneously a little bit more information, is because there is a serious clash between the Arabs who are living there and the Jews. So the Jews come in, they buy land, and then the Jews get killed. Their buildings get burned down. So instead of cracking down, or in addition to cracking down, because they actually do crack down, they send a large military, force at this point. This is just prior to World War II. The Brits send a large military force to occupy Palestine. And there is severe issues with the Arab Palestinians and the Israelis. They do not like being together. Now, there's kind of a debate over who started what first. And you have, I'm not going to get into that today because it's not clean. And you even have terroristic acts by the Jews before this is all done, after they get pushed. But it's important to remember the reason why we clamp down on Jews is because of the unrest between the two. And again, I really want to emphasize how bad Britain's management of this was. But continuing on.
The following year, 1931, pressure from Zionists within the British government and also world Zionist leaders talks Ramsay MacDonald into dropping the white paper. And from that moment, there is no limit on Jewish immigration into Palestine.
This reversal coincided with events elsewhere that would supercharge the conflict. In 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany and began instituting a wave of anti-Semitic policies.
And for right now, we're going to pause. If you guys want to enjoy more of this, go over to YouTube, Imperial War Museums, great documentary over there. But what you'll find, and the more research you do, you'll find that actually the Arabs ultimately sided with they sided with Hitler on this. And part of it was because they have a general alignment of disdain. And you'll actually see that part of it, the Jews quickly enlisted in, especially those who were living there, a lot of them enlisted into the British military because they wanted to fight. They wanted to save their family members who were suffering from the Holocaust. And of course, the Axis powers made really good bedfellows with the Arabs. And you'll actually see that a lot of that kind of continued and mingled in to the conflict during World War II. At the end of World War II, there was a large influx of Jewish people back into Palestine, and the rest is history. They started a war for independence. All of the Arabs came in, tried to destroy the land that was set up by the Brits as the Jewish nation. The Jews started to stake their claim to the territory. Then we have the 6-Day War later, and we have all these other conflicts where the Jews constantly grow and grow and grow in size. And here we are today. So where does all of that lead us? Before I get there, I know, Steve, you were going to say something.
Yeah, just a little tidbit of information. During World War II, when Iran joined up with Hitler, that was when Iran changed its name to Iran.
Yep.
What was it? Persia? Was it Persia
yes.
Before that?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And when they joined Hitler in World War II, they changed their name to Iran.
Why the change?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the change of Iran was the meaning of what the name was.
Which was to
exterminate Jews.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, or
don't do that.
Something.
Don't go there.
I'm probably wrong, but
okay.
I'd like to find out what it meant.
I have to go look it up now. Okay, Steve, don't do that on the. No. Okay.
That's why I'm saying if I'm not mistaken,
Steve, it means the land of the Aryans. It means the land of the Aryans, because I was like, that's not true. It is the land of the Aryans. So, and again, it's a designation from the old Iranian Arya, meaning compatriot, or Aryan. It links really well in with the Germans, but no, it's not necessary.
Well, now the audience has some research.
Right. It's the land of the Aryans.
It always does good to have
go home and look that up myself.
Yeah. So no, because I knew this from before in a dissertation. Someone laid it out that says it's the land of the Aryans, and again, it's the view of a certain people look a certain way, and of course also attached to some ancient pagan worship. But that's another issue. Steve, you derail me. Okay. Killing me, man.
It's okay.
You're killing me, old man. Okay. So let's bring it back in here, Steve.
Hold on.
No.
Roll them in.
Reel him back in.
Oh my gosh, Steve, you're killing me. So, but yes, so it was originally, the Aryans were originally Caucasians, as someone says in the comment section right here. That is correct. Absolutely. And by the way, MQG says audience has to do research. Good one. Yeah. Well, hopefully we all are doing research, but
don't ever take what somebody says for granted. Please check everything.
Especially
the dumbest people in the world.
Especially Steve.
We research our stuff here.
And I'll tell you what, never my spelling. Oh, I am horrible at spelling.
So, thank you, Steve. I went through a lot of effort to research this, Steve. Make sure that you do too. Help me out, old man. Come on. Okay. Speaking of helping out, let's go ahead and look at a debate. And I want to get a little bit of help from Andrew Wilson today, because Andrew Wilson is an interesting fellow. I don't fully agree with him with his tack on Israel. But I do think in a recent debate on Uncensored America, he had by the way, link in the description, at Further Every Day. Anybody can find the podcast, Rumble, or YouTube, at Further Every Day. You'll find it there. He lays out his case why he's anti-Zionist, or at least somewhat anti-Zionist. I would not call myself an anti-Zionist. I also won't call myself a Zionist, and I'm going to explain why in a little bit, what I mean by that. But Andrew Wilson lays out his case for why he believes that Zionism is a problem for the church, and the church really ought not to be involved in it. He lays his 10-minute opening statement here. We're not going to go through all 10 minutes. We're going to go through about 2 or 3 minutes of it. And I think it is a very well articulated case. There are some red herrings here, I believe, but there's also some very, very good logic behind what he has to say. So let's go ahead and throw it up there and hear why he says Zionism is a
issue. Is that Israel refuses to disclose if it has nuclear weapons and will neither confirm nor deny if they do, nor allow any inspection of them if they do. Our own CIA has confirmed they do, but they don't disclose it. Second, the Israeli government works hand in hand with the Temple Institute and American evangelicals. Also, there's an organization called CUFI, or Christians Unified for Israel. CUFI has 10 million members, and Israel doesn't even have 10 million citizens. CUFI spreads the false heresy of dispensationalism and hosts charismatic doctrine heresy as well. By Ridvan's own faith, he knows these are heresies. CUFI is on over 300 college campuses and growing. Their stated goal is to educate millions of Americans on these heresies, according to their own website, quote, through our 16 social media accounts, websites, blogs, daily briefs, to bring in groups of pastors and next generation influencers and students to Israel every year. Guys like Charlie Kirk and, dare I say, Ridvan and David Wood and others. To quote, those would be the types of influencers who would be their target. Not saying that CUFI paid for any of that. I'm just saying that would be the target. To reach thousands through CUFI Weekly and Israel Collective videos on YouTube, has brought in over 1,000 major influencers, including celebrities. All of this is right from their site. Now, what do these people want, you ask? Well,
so let's pause here real quick. And I'm going to tie this a little bit back to, I want you to think about this. What do we see with AIPAC? We see a significant amount of influence on American politics. We see them hire a significant amount of Democrats to run America by paying them large amounts of campaign contributions. Okay, so I want to paint a clear image here. I want us to look on truth. We have a quasi religiously based institution paying money to promote it. And again, I'm tepidly dispensationalist. Okay. I think dispensationalism, there's some stuff that's really stupid and wrong. And there's some of it that's very interesting and very good. But if it becomes your worldview, it's a problem. So not entirely anti-dispensationalist here, but he's saying we have a huge amount of money going into the Western church from Israel. And what do some of these people look for? This is his point. I think it's interesting.
This is going to blow your mind, but this is what they want. They want to assist with the fulfillment of biblical prophecy to bring about a new false Messiah and usher in an Armageddon. Not kidding. Not kidding. Now, the Temple Institute's goal in Israel, using both private and Israeli state money, is to rebuild the third temple and name a Messiah, which Christians know is a false Messiah. Israel, the supposed secular state, gives large swaths of money to the Temple Institute, and many government officials back this undertaking. So remember when I said Christians ought not support heresies? Well, here's why. Right now, this second, major personalities on the right, such as Charlie Kirk, most of the Daily Wire, even perhaps David Wood and Ridvan themselves, who I like, know for sure that any Messiah named by Israel will be Antichrist. They know it. Now, perhaps not the Antichrist, but the spirit of Antichrist will be with whoever this person is, and they have to denounce Christians definitionally. Have to. So to recap, The supposed secular Zionist government is giving money to the religious Zionists in Israel and get American support to do this with both American government money and direct aid, with mega preachers like John Hagee leading the charge in America with Kufi to back this endeavor to usher in Antichrist. So, Ridvan, I will see any argument you make for why Christians ought to support Zionism, and I will raise you one Antichrist as an ought not. This is the most powerful ought not for Christians to support Zionism, and it is really the one argument I want Ridvan to address, as it's my primary argument.
By the way, spoiler alert for those of you who do not want to go through an hour and 40-minute debate video, Ridvan did not address it. And so I would actually like to address the biblical side of this, because I do believe that it is important that we kind of look at this. But before we do, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't remember if it was before this part or after this part, but Andrew also talks about where the Israelis and the Christians' belief and their gods, how they believe in Jesus, and how Israel believes in a God, and that they obviously believe in two different gods and they're not the same ones. And so obviously what they believe in is not the same, and they believe in two different gods.
Well,
did you remember hearing that on there?
So what his, and again, for those of you wondering what Andrew Wilson's religious persuasion is, he's Greek Orthodox.
Correct.
So, and they come down very hard on the Jews. And by the way, correctly, so we do not agree on who God is exactly. If you do not agree on who Messiah is, you cannot agree on who God is. That is a fact. You cannot until a Jew, but the one thing I would say is that the Jews, our objective as Christians is not to convert Jews. It's to let them know that Messiah has come. That is our objective. They are part of the way there, but not in a full salvific way. Okay, there's a lot of people, I know I've got a really good friend of mine, he's a pastor. He believes that the Jews are saved by nature of their Jewishness. And it's like, that's not in the Bible. Mm-mm. And I think it's very important that we go and we start to look at the scriptures, because you have this debate between, in the Christian circle. By the way, if you want to go Uncensored America, Andrew Wilson versus Apostate Prophet, two Greek Orthodox gentlemen hammering it out. Andrew Wilson wins the debate almost exclusively because Ridvan is a nice guy, but he's not a debater. And I don't think that his position, the way he framed it, was entirely defensible. But let's get into the scripture. I think that's the most important part of this. And so what Ted Cruz was attempting to articulate in his rather disastrous interview with Tucker Carlson, and again, I'll say it, that was not a great interview. Cruz looked bad. What you're looking at is Genesis 12:3. Can you get that for me, Miss Nikki?
And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed.
Okay, interesting. I will bless them that bless thee, curse them that curse thee. Who's he talking to right now? Who are we speaking to at the moment?
Abram.
And Abram is talking to God. And if you go just a little bit further down, you realize we're talking about the covenantal promise.
Right.
This is what we're talking about. We're talking about the covenantal promise between God and Abraham. Now, the next question is, how do we interpret this verse? Do we interpret that everything that is done to Abraham that is a good thing is going to receive blessing from God? Well, that's a good question. What does the word blessing mean in the Hebrew, Charlie? You looked this up before we started.
Yeah, in that particular verse, the initial part says to kneel. But as a matter of fact, if you don't mind, give me just a moment, and I will pull up the exact wording.
It means to kneel, to honor.
That's
to provide for.
Here we go.
Yes.
So to kneel, by implication, to bless God as an act of adoration, and vice versa, man as a benefit. And obviously the opposite of that is curse, which is why that's mentioned there also in that verse. But it also means to speak well of. And that's typically, I think, the way that many people understand that verse, especially New Testament, to speak well of. When you see honor thy father and thy mother, bless your mother and bless your father.
It means to honor, or to kneel.
Yep.
So let's keep that in our mind.
Yep.
Because the Apostle Paul, it's not in a vacuum. The Apostle Paul speaks to this later on, and he lays out what the mystery says in Galatians 3:16. Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He saith not into the seeds of many, but as of one, into thy seed, which is Christ. If that doesn't clear it up, let's go a little bit further. Ms. Nikki, can you read that for me?
And if ye be in Christ, then are ye Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise.
Okay, that's interesting. Let's look a little bit more, because Paul does address this in Romans as well. Paul does address this more in Romans as well. Let's go ahead and look here. Romans 2:28. Steve, can you get that for me?
Yes. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God.
Okay, I think we're getting warmer. Let's go just a little bit further. Romans 9:6-8. Not as though the word of God hath taken none effect, for they are not all Israel, which are of Israel. Neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they called children, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called. That is, they, in Isaac, the sacrifice, by the way, that is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed. When we're talking about, I will bless those who bless thee, curse those who curse thee, through thee all the nations will be blessed. It is the root of Jesse that we're speaking of. So does that mean that we support wholeheartedly anything that the nation of Israel does? And I asked this before we started, just to give a little bit of clarification. Again, this is in reference to Ted Cruz's theology, the kind of the kingdom now theology, that we must do everything. Did any of the prophets wholeheartedly support everything that the kings of Israel were doing?
No.
In fact, I think not a single one supported wholeheartedly everything that the kings of Israel were doing. What were the prophets supposed to do? What was their purpose?
Communicate messages from God.
Ultimately, they were there to call the children of Israel back to God.
Yes.
So what I'm saying, and by the way, I think I'm the person in this room who's done I'm saying this to be clear, the most volunteer work for Israeli awareness, for Holocaust remembrance, done all of that. It's been all my life. I can't necessarily support everything that the Israeli government's done. Does that mean I don't support the Jewish people? Do I support their right to exist? I think everyone will at least assent, unless you're a religious Islamist, that the children of Israel have a right to exist. My next question is, can a Christian be a Zionist? And here's the problem with the question. In 1947, you could be a Zionist. What is the definition of Zionism, Charlie?
It's the movement toward a nation state.
Can you be a Zionist today?
No.
Why not?
Because it's already done.
It's done. So you have Zionists and now we have anti-Zionists. And I want to be careful what I'm saying, because there are people who say, like, Andrew Wilson is not an anti-Zionist in the sense of, I want to destroy Israel. People like that say, I want to stop giving the Middle East money. Okay, we give more money to the enemies of Israel than we've given to Israel. I actually could concede that point. Got it. The true anti-Zionist position, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I can't get behind that. And I can't get behind that. Dennis Prager did a video on if you think Italians should have the right to exist, but you want to destroy the state of Italy, then you're obviously anti-Italian. I think that was a bad nation to pick. Let's use one that the United States props up right now, South Korea. Do we spend a lot of money in South Korea?
Probably a fair amount.
I'm sure we do.
Billions. Billions with a B. We have bases over there. We have a strategic foothold into a hostile territory, North Korea and China. North Korea really just being China's proxy satellite state.
I would call that Indochina area.
The Indochina area, 100%.
Fun too.
And Japan, who we mercifully allowed to live, I'm just saying, we are the global hegemon. Other nations before us, if they had the power that the United States has,
would have crushed them.
So we've made allies of these people, and we've come in and we've set up. Maybe you can make an argument against that. Maybe against being gracious the way that we've been. You can make that argument. You make the argument that we need to pull out. My question is if you pull out of South Korea, what's North Korea going to do? What's China going to do?
And that right there ultimately is I love Rand Paul. Please, for those of you that may be listening that are Rand Paul lovers, I'm not trying to come against Rand Paul. I love how he stands on different issues. But that right there is a question for Rand Paul. Rand, if we pull out of there, what happens? And I think so. Let's answer. I've thought about that, and here's what I've kind of loosely concluded. A couple of weeks ago, we took on the attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. We did that from America. It was not conducted from any other base, albeit there were planes that did take off that were from some of those bases.
Sure.
Were they necessary? We could make that case one way or the other. Okay. 50 years ago, would we have been able to do this?
Absolutely not.
Not even close. If we were to pull out of places like South Korea, if we were to pull out of the Middle East, if we were to pull out of Japan, where does that leave things? Because you're not going to execute any attack from a U.S. area.
And who fills in
those vacuums? That's right.
Who fills in the vacuum? That is always my question. Who's going to fill in the vacuum? Because I'm sorry, I'd rather the United States be the global hegemon than China or
yes.
Russia. I don't see it. So my question is, we look at a state like South Korea, and very few people complain. Only the hardcore Rand Paulites, those folks will complain. And I understand the argument.
Yep.
I believe it's incorrect. I believe a pure isolationist view is incorrect. I also believe setting up Madisonian-style democracies in Iran is not going to happen.
And should not.
Because I don't think it's going to work. So my question is, what do you want? If you're an anti-Zionist, what do you want? Because most of the anti-Zionists that I know, the pure, pro-Palestine, they want no regime change in Iran. What are you asking for in Israel? You want a regime change.
Yep.
You want a regime change. If you want a regime change, come out and say it. Because, and look, I just said anti-regime change in Iran. But those who are pro-Palestine, they want a regime change. If you are pro-Palestinian, you want a regime change. Now, what regime do you say you want to put in? One that allows Christians to live without taking the flight test off the skyscraper. I mean, right now, you look at how Hamas is treating the pro-Hamas protesters that are trying to come in via Egypt. I don't know if you've seen those videos. Have you seen them?
I have not.
Beaten, hit by the Arabs and by the Egyptians?
I have not.
I did see that.
It's crazy. These people think that it's like, oh, we're for freedom. They're not for freedom. They're for religious purity.
Yep.
You don't know. You don't know if you think that replacing Israel is going to somehow be better. Now, Andrew Wilson, I think correctly points out that the state of Israel didn't have to be a Jewish ethno-state, that we could have made it so that Christians could immigrate there. My next question is, you and what gun is going to impose that now?
Mm-hmm.
That was a suggestion, very valid suggestion in 1947. You and what gun, post 1948, patriation of Israel, how are you going to enforce a different state rather than Israel?
Yep.
How are you going to do it? We can talk about it all we want esoterically, but what really is going to happen if you want a regime change in Israel? Who are you going to have to knock off? Netanyahu, all these other people. Maybe you don't like them.
There's not going to be anybody who's Jewish to come to power that the Palestinians or the Arabs are going to want. They truly want to
annihilation.
Yes, that's what they're after. And the fact is, if you look at this from a spiritual, biblical understanding, the fact that Israel even exists today after being displaced for 2,000 years is a miracle. There's more going on here than what the eye see. There is a spiritual application. Now, you don't have to agree with everything that Israel does militarily. You don't have to agree with some of their, but it's going to happen according to Scripture, and it is happening.
I think one of the most interesting points on that, too, is that when Israel was formed in 1948, what immediately happened thereafter? They were attacked. Mm-hmm. And what's really surprising is that you're talking about Israel, who was, I'm going to call it, they were somewhat weak. They were depleted of bodies. I don't mean to be sacrilegious when I say that, but they didn't have the soldiers that they had before because of what had happened up to that point.
Correct.
And yet, what happens? They hold ground. And not only did they hold ground, they eventually took ground. I don't know, there are a number of different wars in the course of human history where I believe you can say that was God's hand. That was God's hand. That was God's hand. I can honestly tell you, with regards to the state of Israel and being attacked afterwards, I firmly believe that was God's hand.
At the very minimum, what we're seeing right now is necessary steps towards the end times.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to be able to topple the nation of Israel, even if we want to. I think, and again, for those of you who are saying that this is unbiblical, this is not a commonly held view in the church, Cyril, Augustine, and a bunch of others said they suspected that God had preserved the Jewish people as a people for hundreds of years after the sacking of Jerusalem. They said, we're going to be seeing something interesting. God still has a plan for them. Now, and these are not pro-Israel people.
Correct.
These are Catholic Church fathers who didn't particularly like the Jews. They didn't particularly hate them necessarily, but they, it's like, look, these are infidels. They've rejected Christ. They killed Christ. Their opinions, okay?
Sure.
What they said. These people rejected and killed Christ. They don't love Christ. But the fact that they're still alive says that God is doing something with them. So it's not a new thought. We've always wondered if something would happen, and now Israel's coming together. Now, what I will say, I do not want to be a part of building the third temple. By definition, the second temple's destruction was an act of God's judgment. When they raise the third temple, it will be an active act of rebellion to God. And they will bring about Antichrist when they do it. On that, Andrew Wilson and I are in full agreement. I do not want to be involved in what ultimately will become the abomination of desolation. And I think we need to be wary of that.
But we must realize one thing. When God made a covenant with Abraham, God didn't break his covenant, even though Abraham's children did. The children of Israel broke the covenant. God cannot break his covenant. He cannot lie. So what he stated in the Old Testament to Israel, he's going to keep that promise. So when you fight against Israel and the existence of Israel and what's going to happen, you gotta
fighting
be
against God.
careful. Yeah, you gotta be careful, because if people are saying that, well, now the church is, Israel no longer matters to God. Well, you've probably misunderstood biblical concepts of God's character.
It literally says in the scripture that we are grafted in and they will be regrafted. And so we have a responsibility to the root. We do not have a responsibility to the branch that was cast away. It's like being an adopted child. If the child misbehaves and is disowned, you do not have a responsibility to do everything that child says. You better well love that child as much as is possible. And that doesn't mean enable, but that means love them, desire the best for them, honor them, bless them. We should bless them. We don't have a boast over the branch that was cut off. We should look at that with humility as Christians. And also we should pray for restoration. We really should pray for some form of restoration. Yes, Steve.
You look at how long have the Hebrew people been around? How long has God had this covenant with them, with Abraham?
Right.
And he's talked about protecting them, being with them, and that they were God's people. And their objective was to do what? Spread God's word. Get it out there to the world.
Yep.
Are they doing that?
Nope.
Well, they didn't. No,
They're still not doing it.
Well,
they never did.
And they never did.
Israel was supposed to be an evangelistic nation. They were supposed to bring people in. There was a whole system for immigration set up. And just like every other human civilization, what did they become? They become xenophobic. They became hostile to that. So God says, look, now I'm going to open it up in spirit and truth and allow the Gentiles to come in as possible. Understand something, though. God does desire the trophy of grace that is the children of Israel. What we can't do is we can't align ourselves with sinful stuff. Our priority is to Christ.
And when you graft a different branch on, why do you graft that branch on? To get a different fruit off of that strong root.
Yep.
So you're growing a different fruit.
You're taking, no. It'll be the same fruit. It'll be the same fruit, but the
fruit will have what comes from the tree. That's just like growing. Like you can grow a pear off of an apple tree. You've got two different fruits growing, but you're using that tree and that strong root to grow that graft off of that tree.
Both are olive branches in
correct. They're both olive branches, but one was wild.
The purpose is one will bear fruit, one is not bearing fruit. It'll be cut off until it bears fruit. So to kind of pull all of this in, can you be a Zionist and a Christian? I'm going to say no, because you can't be a Zionist anymore. You can be anti-Zionist, but I don't think that is a Christian worldview to hold. You can't be against the state of Israel, as in from the river to the sea, and I'm defining it this way. If you believe that the state of Israel should be destroyed, I think you're missing something. I humbly suggest that you're missing the point that there is a prophetic return that is going to occur. And even Catholic Church fathers believed this, that we were going to see something interesting happen with the Jews in the future. I don't think they conceived of a repatriation of Israel. I don't think they had that thought. But they said God's not done with the Jewish people. We'll see whenever they get chastised and they get fixed, God will bring them back. He'll bring them to the end of themselves and bring them back. And they'll come into the fold of Christianity. I think we're seeing that right now, the start of it, but we're not there. I can't support everything that the government of Israel is doing. I also cannot imagine, some folks want Bibi Netanyahu to be removed. Okay. Who do you want to replace him? Every other party in Israel, as far as I've seen, is leftist or corrupt. Who do you want to replace him with? And again, that now comes out of a religious issue into a geopolitical issue. So I would say, my opinion, you can't be a Zionist anymore, one way or the other. You can be pro-Israel's right to defend themselves. I think they have the right to defend themselves. You can be also critical of some of the stuff that Israel, the government of Israel has done. I think that's only right. That's actually in line with the prophets. That's what they've always done. But I don't think that you can be pro-Zionist anymore because the question's already been settled. There is a Zion. It already exists. I don't know. Just a little quick wrap up on thoughts, Miss Nikki.
Well,
on that one.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I'm a big supporter of Israel, but I do understand. I mean, the military and the politics of it, you may not agree with it, but the existence of Israel and the major role that it plays in the world and in the future, I certainly support.
Charlie, I mean, what do you think about the premise here that we're laying out?
Yeah, I don't have an issue with the premise. Let's take the two extremes. The Ted Cruz extreme, that's not right, and the annihilation of Israel is not right.
Correct.
So, I would say that we need to be very careful and very wary of what we're supporting and why we would do well to work through that. And a lot of people really don't think through this. They really don't. And I'm talking Christians. I'm not worried about the world per se, but there's a lot of Christians that do not know where they stand on this issue other than what they've been told what to believe.
I was told in Sunday school that we are here to, to provide for the state of Israel. It's like, well, no. I know. No, God bless you, Ted Cruz. I think you're awesome. But no, you weren't elected to be Israel's number one defender. You were elected to be my state senator in Texas, sir.
Now I'm gonna disagree with you a little bit.
Uh-oh.
Because I truly believe.
Let Steve go. Let Steve go.
Okay.
And then we'll do it.
On what?
Final thoughts.
Oh, final thought
on that.
Israel. Well, I think we need to support the people. The government, I have some issues on, and the grafting of the fruits, I disagree with you on that, on the different fruits.
It says olive.
Right.
Read the Bible.
Right. I have. I love it. I'm going to tell you, there's two different types of olives, a wild one and a normal one, because the same way with peaches and apples, a wild one and a regular one are two different ones.
I thought it was black olives and green olives.
With you, Steve. I'm messing with you. But yeah, just go ahead, and then we really do need to move.
Well,
that's why the Gentiles are so different.
I do believe that the sun rises and falls for the covenant that God made with Israel. Now, we are now in the hour of grace, and that is for the Gentile. But God is going to deal with Israel in the future. And I believe that America is raised up to be as mighty in power as she is to make sure that Israel exists until that time happens.
I totally agree with that. You and I don't disagree.
Okay.
We agree. But I'm saying there has to be some pushback to the John Hagee side of Christianity that is intentionally trying to bring about Antichrist through a building of the temple. Someone has to say, wait a minute. Not every Jewish priority is a Christian priority. Someone has to say, okay, let's blow up just a little bit. Not big on the temple being built. It's going to be built. I don't think we're going to be able to stop it. I think that God does things in threes. You look at the hordes that sacked Jerusalem the first two times. They were from Iran, and they came from that direction. One was underneath the Roman banner, but they were the local garrison there under the Roman banner. And you're probably going to see the same thing happen again a third time. And Christ is going to come, and the Jews are going to look on whom they've pierced, and they're going to say, oh, crap. I'm sorry.
Screwed it up.
Yep.
But as Dennis Prager has said, if we ever get a chance to talk to Messiah, he's going to say, is this your first or second time here?
That's why only a certain number of Jews will be saved and will end up in Mount Seir and be protected.
I think Steve or John Arthur, we should also mention PragerU has some pretty good videos, short videos on this issue of Israel, and you do well to
worth looking at.
Look at a few of those. Yeah.
So I think nuance is critical here. Understanding the truth, because look, some people will say that the formation of Israel was clean. It was was somehow perfect. There we go. Let me whip you guys around. It was perfect. Miss you, Ryan. Talking and running is hard. Creating the state of Israel's creation was not ideal. Okay, and there was a lot of stuff that you can point out. But what I'm going to say is that I think there's something very interesting occurring here. We have something, okay, maybe you hate dispensationalism. There are parts of it that I cannot agree with. But I think something interesting is occurring right now. You're seeing what looks like a rapid acceleration of end times, and the prophecy of the fig tree is going to bear fruit. It's interesting. We'll see what that means. All prophecy will be fulfilled as prophesied, not necessarily as interpreted.
I have to say, the one verse that comes to my mind when I think about the formation of Israel, you meant it for evil, i.e. the rest of the world. They had their own agenda, but God meant it for good. Yep. And he has taken it and set it up for a beautiful finish.
I think so. So real quick, let's go ahead and try to cover, I don't know if we even want to cover the land deal because we went so long on this, but let's go ahead and cover a little bit of the land deal. The land deal was recently kiboshed out of the big, beautiful bill. Okay. So I actually want to go ahead and pull one or two things out of this, because I find this as a microcosm for what is wrong with American politics. And so for those of you who've been living under a rock, Mike Lee, and there's a reason why we're bringing this up. Last week, we had a whole thing prepared, and we're going to talk about Thomas Jefferson's thoughts on this issue, because he wrote ubiquitously, proliferously, and he actually wrote something somewhat to this effect, and I think it was worthwhile. It was in a correspondence between Thomas Jefferson and James Madison in October of 1785, and we're going to talk about that and why that's relevant today. But before we do, I want to get into Mike Lee, because Mike Lee was proposing the sale of public lands. Why is that a problem? Well, let's go ahead, hear what Mike Lee has to say, and then I think we can go ahead and build a case one way or the other from here. So let's go ahead and play this clip, see what we see.
We've made recent changes just in the last few days to narrow the scope.
I'm Ben Winslow in Salt Lake City. Even though Senator Mike Lee says he's revising his public land sale proposal to get it in the big, beautiful bill, groups across the political spectrum are mobilizing to make sure it dies.
I'm like a national park junkie, just so we're clear.
Appearing on the Charlie Kirk Show, Senator Lee outlined his new idea for selling some federally controlled public lands.
The vast majority of it has zero recreational value. A lot of it doesn't have any conservation value. So what I'm proposing is that we take just a fraction. It's a fraction of 1% of that land.
The senator's original plan put millions of acres up for sale. It prompted widespread public backlash. The Senate parliamentarians stripped it from the big, beautiful bill, declaring it improper under their rules. Utah's senior senator is now proposing areas within 5 miles of urban areas for housing.
There are some people on the right who are also opposing it. Well, I believe many of them have been armed with information that's caused them to be mistaken about what the bill does, and more importantly, what it doesn't do.
There a lot of land that is valuable to the hunting and fishing community could be lost, could be sold. And once it's sold, it's gone forever.
A number of groups are still mobilizing against it. Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is urging its members to flood the lines in D.C.
And if we're going to try to solve affordable housing, we need to look at those individual parcels from a community perspective and bring those forward and make sure that we're not going to be building or selling off land that's going to be valuable for mule deer migration, hunting, fishing, et cetera.
I think it signals an even greater threat to the Wasatch Front. I mean, he's narrowed it down to be within 5 miles of urban centers, and that really defines it as St. George, Moab, and the entire Wasatch Front.
The left-leaning policy group Alliance for a Better Utah is hosting a postcard writing party on Wednesday night to send letters to Senator Lee and Senator John Curtis.
This public lands issue and the big, beautiful bill has done a lot for our community in bringing us together united against one cause, which is to get Mike Lee out of office, or at least get him to pay attention and prioritize Utah values over partisan.
If it were revived and passes the Senate, the proposal still faces opposition from within Senator Lee's own party. Montana Congressman Ryan Zinke, the former Interior Secretary under President Trump, is among them, telling Scripps News.
Look, whether the public land is in Montana, Utah, or Maine, it belongs to all Americans, and all Americans deserve a voice on the highest and best use, period.
Now, the big, beautiful bill could be voted on in the Senate by this week or next week. In Salt Lake City, Ben Winslow.
So that was produced 3 days ago by Fox News. Now, why are we bringing it up? Why is this a case that I think is worthy of us discussing? Well, when I first heard about this, I said, okay, we have 1%, like 1.5% of public lands for sale, and they are not parks. They are not recreation. BLM land is largely managed pretty poorly. So I want to know what the big deal is. And we're going to get to it in just a moment, but I actually want to go ahead and get one pundit's thoughts on this, because I thought Glenn Beck had an interesting thought on this. And his issue is, hey, I'm kind of sort of in favor of this with a caveat. And we'll articulate that in just a second, because I think it's important to know what exactly are the risks of selling off public land. And it really has to do with my favorite word, China. He may or may not, I don't remember if he addressed.
And that's the most important one. When you have the federal government claiming that they already have the money being pulled off every year. They have the money pulled off so they can buy more land. This is the only thing that they actually have a slush fund for, that, you know, your Social Security, screw that. But they have the money to buy more land. And why are they buying it? Not so you can hunt and fish, but so they can push you into the cities. You're not going to be able to hunt and fish on that land by 2050. Your kids won't have that opportunity. Why do you think that all around the big national parks, they are letting the infrastructure, the roads and everything else in places where it's private land? Why doesn't the government fix the roads, fix the infrastructure? Because they don't want people there. They want to keep pushing people into the cities. We can disagree on this, on what percentage or what lands or whatever. We can debate all of that. But if you don't take into consideration that the federal government is trying to gobble up all of the land, read the UN Agenda 2030, read Agenda 2050, read the World Economic Forum, read anything from these radical environmentalist groups. They're all leftists. Why do we give up the word environmentalist? He's right, because it just means communist to us, which should tell you everything you need to know. Who is leading all of this? Globalists, communists, radicals, radical environmental. You know what? I will listen to the farmers. I'll listen to the ranchers. I'll listen to any real, true conservative that understands and has read Agenda 2030, Agenda 2050, the World Economic Forum's plans. I'll listen to you as long as you know it. We can.
So this is the pro Mike Lee position. The U.S. government owning all of this, they're going to buy up more, and they've been buying up more, and they wish to purchase more. Why? Not so that you can use it, but so that they can hold it. And eventually, when the communist dictatorship style people get a hold of it, we're going to have a problem. Now, let's go to the opposite end of the scale, the opposite end of this spectrum. And the question is, who has the ability to buy it? Or who's not prevented from buying it?
So can we?
That's point and then counterpoint. Nope. Charlie, I want you to say something.
Yeah, man, I have got such strong opinions on here. In number one, can I just say, I think Glenn Beck has spot on hit it. So let's just step back from that for a moment. Let's say that we didn't know what Glenn Beck said and he didn't espouse anything that we just heard. question, what percent of American land does the U.S. government own? And I'll bet you a lot of people don't really realize this.
Too much.
28%. Now, I've got a question for you. Why does my government need 28% of the U.S. land?
Why does the federal government?
Thank you.
That's the issue.
That's the issue. I totally disagree with Charlie Kirk. Yes, park junkie, praise the Lord. That's not what we're talking about here. And I'm okay with the government owning some federal parks and managing those. That's okay. But that's not what we're talking about. Do I want the federal government owning anything? Do I want the federal government managing anything? I want their hands out of as much as possible. That's what I want. Mike Lee, thank you very much. You are on the right track. There are some things that we need to do, but you're thinking right.
You're doing it wrong.
You're doing it wrong, but you're thinking right.
It's the same issue. It's the same issue with the Short Act and the Hearing Protection Act.
Yes.
I tried to slide them into this omnibus budget reconciliation bill. The reason why we're doing that is because we don't have 60 votes to pass a repeal of the National Firearms Act. The same reason why Mike Lee is slipping this in is because it doesn't have the votes to be able to carry in a regular vote. But there's another issue, and this is the counterpoint to Mike Lee. So I agree with Mike Lee that there should be access to local and state governments to purchase, or even individuals. But there's a problem. Multinational corporations and nationalities are allowed to buy it. So historically, we've had some serious problems with that exact outcome. Yes, Steve, I know you're dying. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm dying here. See, some of these BLM lands, the thing is some of them are close to areas of national security.
Yep.
Okay. That's one of the things a lot of people don't realize about BLM lands. A lot of it that they're talking about wanting to sell off has a lot of national security significance. Now, who are the ones that are going to want to buy this land? Think about it. Who's our number one person that we worry about?
China.
Who is going to be the first on the list to want to buy this land? China.
And that's where they need to make a law that the land, number one, can't be sold to other countries, and number two, so much land in an area close to secure areas cannot be sold.
I think you're on the right track there, and I'm not a fan of regulation, but if you are going to sell this land and make it available to Americans to purchase, and you want to make sure it stays out of those hands, this is where you will have to put some regulation in place.
But the thing is, only a small portion is going to be available for regular Americans. Most of it is going to go off to large investment firms.
No, that's my point, though, Steve.
Yeah.
You're saying we're saying the same thing. What we're saying is we don't want to see that.
Right.
That's where the regulation has to happen. I will say this. Anybody ever heard of Sarah Huckabee Sanders?
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Kicked out all of the landowners.
Governor of Arkansas said, "You Chinese owners, you've got X number of days. See you later. You're out of here." And that's the kind of stance that you have to take. BlackRock, sorry, not available for you. Let's try again.
And so you had the Sagebrush Rebellion. You have all these other cases in history where we've made sales, and because it wasn't metered correctly, it got into large multinational corporation style hands, or into the hands of investors like robber barons who ultimately, again, we're talking about the 1800s, some of these buys.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of time to go into it. But the point being, this needs to be done orderly. We need to stop it with these omnibus bills, and we need to.
Amen.
He gives this percentage of what the land is, but people don't realize how much land it is. We're talking over 3 million acres of land that this he's talking about.
Correct.
Over 3 million acres.
But that goes right to my point. Do we want the federal government owning 28% of the land?
So
no, and I
don't.
There's a balance.
And there is a balance. That's right.
And I don't want them out there buying more land.
Amen.
Correct.
I don't want
them doing that either.
But Glenn Beck nailed it. This is where he's spot on right. And if there was one thing that I would encourage our listeners to really start to tune into, it's this 30 and 30 issue, the 2030 initiative, the 2050 initiative. A lot of people have never heard of this. And if they have, it's only been through a news report that briefly mentioned it. He is spot on about what the globalists and the elitists are trying to do. Folks, it's happening. They're pushing people more into the cities, and they are developing in the U.S. I'm not talking about the world. I'm talking about in the U.S. They are pushing for what they call mega regions. You want to know what Dallas-Fort Worth is? That's the start of a mega region or a super region. Where is it going to reach to? It's going to go to Lubbock. It's going to go north. Already has.
Someone said in the comment section, 15-minute cities.
Yes.
That's what they're looking for. Yep. They're looking for the 15-minute city where you will all eat bugs and you will be happy.
And look, you said that to be funny. That is exactly what the globalist elitists want. They want the bugs to be your source of food.
Fort Worth and Dallas are already pretty much like one city.
Yes.
And
yes,
I've said it before. I'll say it again. You know, poor Klaus Schwab. He has no friends.
Oops.
Do you know how I know he has no friends? No one said, Klaus, we appreciate your dedication to the entire global domination shtick here. We thank you for being here, sir. However, not you. Please don't you go out and say that you will eat bugs, you will own nothing, and you will have nothing in that Bond villain accent looking like Blofeld from a Bond movie.
Isn't he kind of in a bad way right now?
Yeah, he's ultimately getting replaced.
Yeah.
So good for them. Hopefully they replace it with someone with some curb appeal, maybe a nice looking woman would be my suggestion. Not to give them ideas, but not a man with a German accent. And it looks like he needs a, long haired cat to stroke.
And somebody with some decent morality.
Well, they ain't going to do that. They're looking for global domination, but at least make it look cute or sexy or interesting instead of Klaus Schwab.
I think one of the greatest things our viewers could do, go buy some land.
Go buy some land. Honestly, go buy some land. And what we really need to start doing is we need to start thinking along the lines of multi-generational wealth.
Yes.
Multi-generational land purchases. Guys, start thinking in that realm. We should be looking for that.
Correct.
So with that,
we could go on another hour on that one.
Let's go ahead and move into something a little bit more lighthearted. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab some Nikki Knows Facts.
What?
So, Nikki Knows Facts. What are we talking about today, Miss Nikki?
Well, we talked about last week the Bermuda Triangle and the mysteries around the Bermuda Triangle. And I said today that we were going to look at another area in the world that has a lot of mystery surrounding it. And we're going to move up to Alaska. And in this area, we have a little, we have a lot of mystery, but we have
gone any more 180 than that.
I know, but we're going to, this area up here in Alaska actually has a connection to JFK and the assassination of JFK. And we're going to kind of
no.
We're going to get it. Yeah, it's mysteries, the unexplained, the unknown, things that keep us asking questions, things that make us want to think of conspiracies.
You're going to have your own TV show.
The one that killed JFK came out of the Bermuda Triangle.
Oh, hold up.
Is that what happened?
Let this woman cook.
Oh, okay. I just wondered.
October 16th, 1972, the current House Majority Leader, who was Hale Boggs, was in Alaska doing a campaign trip with the Alaskan Representative Nick Begich. Begich? Okay.
Begich. The Begich family is pretty popular up there.
When they were traveling on a twin-engine plane that just mysteriously disappeared, and there was some bad weather, so they think the plane went down. However, at the time, I think some of you older people will remember this name, Tip O'Neill of Massachusetts.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this was the Speaker of the House, so this is pretty serious that he disappeared. And they set up the largest search and rescue operation to that date. They actually involved 40 military aircraft, 50 civilian planes, a search grid of 325,000 square miles. There was more than 306 hours of search time. And after 39 days, the search was called off with no sign of wreckage and no survivors. Now, this was also a time that prompted Congress to pass a law mandating the installation of emergency locator transmitters in the U.S. civil aircraft. It had to take the Speaker of the House for us to get that passed, but so they did. But anyway, here's something for you to think about. Hale Boggs was appointed by Lyndon B. Johnson, on the Warren Commission. You remember the assassination of John F. Kennedy?
Oh, yes.
And who was his lone executor? Lee Harvey Oswald.
Mr. Oswald himself.
Well, Mr. Boggs, who was on this Warren Commission, did not believe that it was a lone executioner. He believed there was more people involved. So here comes the conspiracy. Was he killed? Now, imagine, this is the funny thing, is that the Warren Commission report came out in 1964. But, people still to this day talk about that report, and they don't believe it.
Which is one reason why they would like to see all of the
That's why.
documents.
Well, this representative, he didn't agree with that report, and he was on it. And he didn't agree. And so the conspiracy was that maybe he was killed so that he would not proceed in looking into this further or bringing up more questions about it. So that's a conspiracy. And actually, Robert Ludlum wrote a novel. I can't know if I can say this, the Matarese Circle. And it portrayed Boggs as being killed to stop his probe into the assassination. Great mystery. Great conspiracy. Maybe he was. Actually.
I bet he was killed by the Clintons.
Well, that's generally a pretty good guess.
Actually, the truth is that they did run into some foul weather, and this plane disappeared in a place known as the Alaskan Triangle. Now, we have that picture of the Alaskan Triangle.
I do. 1 second. I'm pulling it up.
It's a pretty vast region. And they listed it as an unforgiving terrain in Alaska. Now, get this. They have a long history of unexplained disappearances in this area. I know. I looked this up in a couple different places because I'm going to give you a number that really is outrageous. Around 1,600 to 2,200 people go missing in the Alaska Triangle every year.
Where that area is at really disappoints me because that is one section that has one excellent herd of caribou that goes through it.
Oh.
And I have thought about going hunting in that area.
Well,
and I look at that and go,
maybe not.
Maybe not. I don't want to disappear.
Some sources say, get this is a pretty high number. Some sources say that more than 20,000 people have vanished in this vast triangle since the early 1970s. So my son goes to Alaska every other month, and I called him up and I said, you're not going anymore, because he has to get on these small planes. And I said, you're done. You're not going. I don't care what you have to do. You're not going. But
it's your job.
This area, as a hunter, what you were just saying, wouldn't it be cool to be able just to get a drone with a camera in there and fly into that area and just see the natural wildlife? I hope it never gets settled. But it is a big curiosity for people who want to go hiking and camping and hunting. And in Alaska, the small planes it's very necessary for them to get to one place to the other.
So keep that up. No, bring that back up there, John Arthur, if you would, for a moment, please. If you think about this, it's really hard to fathom that you could lose that many people in that area.
Mm-hmm. Then I know. Go ahead.
Well, especially if you're talking about people that are, I'm not going to say survivalists, but they're outdoors people. They understand what that terrain is kind of like. And it almost speaks that there's a lot of people that are going there that really don't know what they're doing in that area. I don't know. It just makes me wonder. I mean, Steve, you're an outdoors person, and there's just some basics that you understand when you step into that.
Oh, yes.
And I don't know. It's hard to fathom. I mean, because that's an average. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're talking 200 people a month. Was my math right?
The average was 1,600.
Something's wrong.
That is a lot. But, you won't hear on the news in Alaska about the small planes going down very much anymore because it happens so often up there. I mean, that is just, I guess that's like a car accident for us. But, and it's a vast region that is, it's all wildlife. It's wild. And if you're in this remote area and you're in Alaska, the storms can come up quickly. So even if you're out hunting, a storm could come up and you could, not survive that. A plane may not survive it. But here's the thing. They can't even find the wreckage. They never found the wreckage.
That's really interesting because you'd have thought that once the snow thaws out, they'd be able to find the wreckage.
But it's a huge, big
area.
Huge area. Also, so you can say that, there's also a huge area where they have the UFO sightings. So something that leaves you with and going, but it's interesting. We talked about the Bermuda Triangle. Well, that's very well traveled, but this is a very remote area. And of course, it's going to attract people. Like I said, I would love to just be able to take a drone in there with a camera and just put it on a tree somewhere and just watch the wildlife. That would be awesome. And just see how beautiful nature, untouched nature would be. So that's our little mystery curiosities for the week.
One of my bucket list areas to go bow hunting.
It would be a beautiful trip. Take me with you, Steve, if we go.
Most definitely.
Oh, Josiah has a bow.
Hey.
Yeah, he does bow hunting, by the way.
That's right.
See? And you're the first person that introduced him to hunting.
I did. Yeah. And it wasn't easy type hunting either. And he did a good job. I was real proud of him.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. No, Josiah would be a lot of fun to go out hunting with.
He is.
He's younger.
Josiah's a lot of fun.
Good guy.
He is. Really is.
Moving in, we're going to try to speed run this, as sad as it is to speed run the book corner, but let's go ahead and get into the Great Divorce. We're going to finish chapter 13 today. Quick overview for those of you who are new to this. We are jumping into the Great Divorce. It is an allegorical representation of heaven, hell, even some purgatory. And what would happen if, in between the time of death and life, what if you have a significant amount of time that God could potentially reach out to you and offer you, even letting you meet people? And we talked about this. We started this a while back. And one of the best stories about this that I've heard recently was a near-death experience where this lady's running across. She is giving birth. She loses a lot of blood, passes out, dies. She flatlines. She sees the next sight is her baby on the other end of this rainbow bridge with her passed away mother and uncle or aunt, whoever, loved ones on the other side. She runs across this bridge and she has this feeling that if she does not grab her child and run back, they're both going to die. So she runs and her baby's already in the hands of this loved one. And she says, I need my baby. They say, we know. We'll see you when you get back. She turns around, she runs across the bridge, and then she wakes up. The moment she regains her pulse, the baby who was stillborn also takes its first breath. In that moment between life and death, is there a place, is there a moment in time where God can reach out to you? Well, we know from near-death experiences like that one. There's another one where a gentleman sees himself on the table, he flatlines, and he says, God, I have done everything wrong, forgive me. He comes to Christ, and when he wakes up, he is a born-again man. Does God have the power in the last moments between death to save you? It is said, the Bible says, to be absent with the body is to be present with the Lord, but how long before you're truly absent from the body? Lazarus was how long? 3 days. So think about it. How long is it to be absent? Maybe it's different in each case. Don't know. C.S. Lewis says, this is not my eschatology, this is not my theology, but it is an interesting look at what might be, and it's kind of a thought experiment to see what would people say if they could see heaven, and what would happen if heaven looked like this? What if hell looked like this? So last week we talked about a woman who is this lovely woman, good Christian woman, married to a man that has this alter id. And ultimately, he cannot accept the fact that she's been happy in heaven without him. He would rather go to hell, back to hell, because he's at the edges of heaven, communing with his wife, just talking to her. But he would rather go back into hell, where he feels like he could be needed, where he could have his own autonomy, where he could be the one who is ultimately sought after, because he guilts and uses pity into driving people to love him, as opposed to what his wife says, who's in heaven, who's been in heaven since she died. She says, I haven't missed you because I've been in love. No, you don't understand. I have been dwelling in love himself. I've been in the presence of the bulb that produces the light, the source of love. Love is on this earth, Lewis would posit, is just like a ray of light. You can never truly come to the source unless you come to Christ. And so rather than accept that on his own terms, he goes back to hell. And so the narrator, who's been speaking with a teacher, he was a former author before he died. He's speaking with this teacher, and he watches this woman go back into heaven while the man goes to hell. And this is where we pick up, because the narrator, which is a shoo-in for Lewis, is uncomfortable. He says, look, how can that even be? She didn't even go and see him off back to hell. How could she enjoy the bliss of heaven while he goes back to hell? And his teacher's response, who's just a saved individual in heaven, he says, heaven will not always be held captive or ransomed to the dog in the manger. And so so Lewis, the narrator, comes back and says, but she didn't even see him off to hell. This is where we pick up. So you say it goes down to the lowest, sir, love, but she didn't even go down with him to hell. She didn't even see him off to the bus, the means by which they came to the edges of heaven. Teacher says this, where would you have had her go? Why, where we all came from on that bus. There's a big gulf beyond the edge of the cliff. Over there, you can't see it from here, but you must know the place I mean. My teacher gave a curious smile. Look, he said, and with a word, he went down on his hands and knees. I did the same. How it hurt my knees, because in heaven, the very grass blades cut the knees, the flesh of those who are not saved, because heaven is truly real and we are not. And presently saw that he had plucked a blade of grass. Using this the thin end as a pointer, he made me see, after I had looked very closely, a crack in the soil so small that I could not have identified this without aid. The teacher continues to say, let's see if I can get it here. He continues, maybe. Pardon me, folks. We're just having a moment here. It's going to come up. I hope.
Oh, boy.
I hope.
Our slides are not sliding.
Our slides not sliding. That's unfortunate. Let's come back here. And okay, so this one slides. This one slides. And this one does not slide. That's okay, guys. You're going to have to look at my ugly mug instead of the beautiful slides that we have while I read. I apologize, folks. So we'll go ahead and continue. He says, I cannot be certain, he said, but this is the crack that you came up through. But through a crack no bigger than that ye certainly came. But I gasped. with a certain feeling of bewilderment, not unlike terror, I saw an infinite abyss, the cliffs towering up and up, and then this country was on top of the cliffs. Aye, but the voyage was not mere locomotion. That bus and all of you inside were increasing in size. Do you mean that hell, all that infinite empty town down there, is just in a little crack, something like this, just a hole in the soil? And his response was, yes, all hell is smaller than one pebble in the real world of heaven. But it is smaller than one atom of this world, the real world. Look at the yonder butterfly. If it were to swallow all of hell, hell would not be big enough to do any harm to it. What Lewis is attempting to conclude here and allude to is that heaven is reality. And that this earth, the smartest man in the world just came out and he gave the opinion that the folks who say that we're in a simulation, they're correct. We live in a simulation, but the simulation is not some matrix-like thing, but much rather it is a fiction, if you will, that is created by a multidimensional being. And it is something that we are living in and we see, but it's not the true reality. I find that to be fascinating because that is something that the atheist has claimed for years and for years. But what's interesting is it actually might be true. Even Lewis kind of posits this in his own way, that you have a world that is more real than what we're dwelling in. I think that's fascinating. So again, just to keep going here, I went ahead and rigged up a slide here to keep going. See, yes, all hell is, wait, let me see. It seems big enough, sir, when you're in it, referring to hell. And yet all the loneliness, angers, hatreds, envies, and itchings that it contains, if rolled into a single experience and put into the scale against the least moment of joy that is felt by the least in heaven, would have been no weight that could have been registered at all. Bad cannot succeed, even in being bad, as long as good is truly good. If all hell's miseries together enter the consciousness of yon wee yellow bird on the bough there in heaven, they would be swallowed up without a trace. It is as if one drop of ink has been dropped into the great ocean to which your terrestrial Pacific itself is only a molecule. Some grand language for heaven. Mm-hmm. So Isaiah said at last, she couldn't fit into hell. Why doesn't God come? Why doesn't God come and rescue us from this? Why doesn't God come and rescue us from hell?
It's our choice. We made a choice to be there.
It's our choice. Could God come down to the depths of hell and dwell and abode with us with joy?
No.
Nope. So again, Lewis is positing a physical hell that is a physical place that is the shutting up of oneself into oneself and the creation of self-torment. My model of hell might be, my understanding and biblical interpretation would be a little bit different, but I find that this is fascinating. The idea that God is so big, and yes, hell is a literal physical place, but it is something that is so small, so diminuted that it doesn't register. And those who consign themselves to hell do just that. They consign themselves.
And the one thought that goes through my mind is in the biblical illustration, straight and narrow is the way, but broad is the path. Mm-hmm. I just think about those contrasts and then listening to this.
So just to continue, unless you got a thought. So just to continue, let's go ahead and keep going here. He nodded. There is not room for her. Hell could not open its mouth wide enough. This is for someone who has truly been regenerated. They've become like Christ. And she couldn't make herself smaller, like Alice, invoking, Alice in Wonderland. Nothing like small enough, for a damned soul is nearly nothing. It is shrunk, shut up in itself. Good beats upon the damned incessantly, as sound waves beat upon the ears of the deaf, but they cannot receive it. Their fists are clenched, their teeth are clenched, their eyes fast shut. First they will not, and in the end they cannot open their hands for gifts, or their mouths for food, or their eyes to see. This is why hell should terrify you. Then no one can ever reach them, asked the narrator. Only the greatest of all can make himself small enough to enter hell, for the higher a thing is, the lower it can descend. A man can only sympathize with a horse, but a horse cannot sympathize with a rat. Only one has descended into hell. And will he ever do it again? Speaking about Christ. It was not long ago that he did. Time does not work that way when once ye have left the earth. All moments that have been or shall be or were or are present in the moment of his descending. There is no spirit in prison to whom he did not preach. And some hear him? Aye. In your own book, sir, you said you were a universalist. This is the narrator speaking to the man who is now his teacher. You talked as though all men would be saved, and St. Paul too. Ye can know nothing of the end of all things, or nothing expressible in those terms. It may be, as the Lord said to Lady Julian, that all will be well, and all will be well, and all manners of things will be well. But it's ill talking of such questions. Because they're too terrible, sir, he asked. No, because all answers deceive. If ye put the question from within time and are asking about possibilities, the answer is certain. The choice of ways is before you, neither is closed, and any man may choose eternal death. So we're navigating the question of, is there in the end free will to choose, or will all souls go to God? And this is a universalist belief. And so Lewis is kind of playing with that, and he's teasing it out. But in the end, this old universalist in Lewis's novel is conceding, you can choose eternal death. You can choose that. So those who choose it will have it, but if ye are trying to leap on into eternity, ye are trying to see the final state of all things as it will be, for so ye must speak. When there are no more possibilities left, but only the real, then ye ask what cannot be answered to mortal ears. Time is the very lens through which ye see, small and clear, as men through the wrong end of a telescope, something that would otherwise be too big for ye to see at all. That thing is freedom, the gift whereby ye most resemble your Maker, and all yourselves parts of eternal reality. But ye can only see it through the lens of time, in a little clear picture through the inverted telescope. It is a picture of moments following one another and yourself in each moment, making some choice that might have been otherwise. Neither the temporal succession nor the phantom of what ye might have chosen and didn't is itself freedom. He's dealing with the issue of free will at its core. They are a lens. The picture is a symbol, but it's truer than any philosophical theorem, or perhaps any mystic's vision, that claims to go behind it. We're going to break this down in just a moment. For every attempt to see the shape of eternity except through the lens of time destroys your knowledge of freedom. He's speaking to the issue of, can a God who foreknows actually create a free will universe? Witness the doctrine of predestination, which shows truly enough that eternal reality is not waiting for a future in which to be real, but at the price of removing freedom, which is deeper than the deeper truth of the two. And wouldn't universalism do the same? You cannot know eternal reality by definition. Time itself and all of the acts that fill time and the definitions, and it must be lived. The Lord said, we are gods. I disagree with this note here, but how long can ye bear to look without time's lens on the greatness of your own soul and the eternal reality of her choice? What is Lewis getting at here? Well, at the end of the day, we've been talking about this a lot lately. We are three-dimensional beings that experience potentially a fourth dimension of time. Time may not be that also. Okay, so you're looking at four-dimensional space-time, 7, 11, 47, depending upon your flavor of theoretical physics. But God is outside of time and space. He exists sans time. Someday, we will too experience existence as God does on some level similar. I don't know if we'll ever fully experience existence the way God does. I'm not sure what heaven exactly looks like. But trying to understand the dichotomy between free will and a God who knew you before you were created is a tough thing to wrestle with. And it's going to be hard for us three-dimensional beings to understand how God, who's outside of time and space, he sees it as though it's a mosaic, a painting. He sees the end of all of the strokes. And I use that analogy because we're a two-dimensional being, or a three-dimensional being experiencing in two-dimensional space. We experience in an XY. If you try to explain to a two-dimensional being what hello, hi, written out on the chalkboard looks like, they're only going to experience one dimension of space. Trying to explain what that second dimension looks like is going to be very hard. God exists outside of that. So understanding heaven and hell, understanding the end of time, what do things look like in eternity? And I love the song Amazing Grace, but when we've been there 10,000 years is a misnomer.
Yes.
It's a fine song. I love it. I'm not dogging on it. Makes the point of we will never get weary of praising God. However, time will not be what it is now. Experientially, it'll be different.
I don't think we'll even know what a year is.
It's going to be a different sort of world, a different experience.
From January to December is what a year is.
Not in heaven.
Right? Oh.
I don't know as we'll ever understand that when we make that conversion. Yeah, really, Lewis is really something. He is an incredibly thoughtful person. And he can be very deep, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I think his imagery is really well noted. And people that can illustrate like that make some of the greatest storytellers. And I hate to use that word because that's not what Lewis is. Lewis, to me, is one of the greatest apologists and philosophers that we have seen in recent history.
Indeed. Final thoughts, Ms. Nikki?
Well, God's character cannot be compromised. So when people today say, well, God is against me because I do this and I do that, and it's just who I am, God is against me. The reality is that you are against God. God was here first. He is the creator. His character cannot change. He cannot lie. And when we are given free will, we can choose to embrace the character of who God is, or we can embrace who we are and what we want. And every person that we've seen up to this point wants to embrace who they are and what they want. And that's just the simple fact of it.
Great thoughts.
Steve?
Yes. 2 Corinthians 5:7. For we walk by faith, not by sight. And that is one of the things that you have to have in God is faith.
Amen.
Is very strong. And it's just like an incident we had at church today on some things that were going on. And the pastor put the faith in the congregation, and faith in God showed up.
Amen.
And it proved itself over and over. Faith in God is strong, and God comes through. And it's about faith in God.
Charlie?
I'll pass for sake of time. Go ahead.
I gotcha. Okay, so final thoughts for the day, guys. Sorry we didn't get to do the Alexander Hamilton bit. Know why you believe what you believe.
Amen.
Do your research. Do your homework. Be careful. Be ready to give an answer for the hope in what you believe. Also, be ready to give an answer for some of the geopolitical things that you believe. Again, I think you can have a consistent worldview that is based on logic, reason, and facts, and still hold the line for each one of these issues, no matter how difficult the issue is, whether it's Israel-Palestine issue, whether it's the land buy issue. Guys, you need to know why you believe what you believe. I was told this in Sunday school is not enough. We need to know why we believe what we believe so that we have a good witness. With that said, thank you so much. We got nothing else for you. You have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.